I'm a little soft-spoken, so I know I have to project better. So Alfonso started us in the Bay Area of California, and I'm taking you to the Bay State of Massachusetts. I am a quality assurance supervisor and also a recruitment supervisor. In the last 2.5 years, I started recruiting, supervising 3 recruiters in our region. The state hired recruiters specifically just to do recruitment and took it out of the area offices and brought it to our regional offices. So we were assigned 3, and I supervise them currently. And the reason I chose this is because one of my the recruiters started doing her recruitment work with faith-based organizations, and in the last 2.5 years, I've seen all the great work that she has done, and not just recruiting families, but also establishing additional supports for our area offices in the region. So what I wanted to do is the similar work that she was doing, and but also do it specifically with faith-based organizations of color. That's where the need was. So this is how I decided to work with faith-based organizations. So I'll talk about the identified issues, the plan of action that I took, and what my expected outcomes were, which I thought that all the faith-based organizations were going to come crawling and want to help, and help with the need of recruiting and having more resources for children. And I'll speak about the research that I did and what I found helpful for my ARRP. And we'll take a look at where Massachusetts is now and where specifically in my region. I know a lot of folks in the bigger states, you talk about counties, but we divide our areas in regards to regions, and then within the regions, we have a different number of offices. In the northern, I'm from the Northern Regional Office, and we have 8 area offices cover that specific area. And we'll talk about the 2 strategies that I completed, and we'll look at the assessment and the lessons that I learned, and I'll wrap up with a conclusion. So, I mean, we know everybody has talked about, and we've learned since the beginning of the fellowship, and the reasons why the fellowship exists is because we know that there's a disproportionality of children of color in our own states, and they have disparate outcomes. They last longer in foster care. They're the least to reach permanency. So, and I know, like Alfonso shared in April, that there's a great need for resources. So, and I know everyone's in the same boat, right? And so we all need resources and need to recruit more. And my belief was, from what I saw in my recruiter, that what the work that she was doing, that there was also an untapped area or resources within the faith-based organizations of color, and my belief was that it would diversify the recruitment work. So again, my plan of action was to reach out to the faith-based communities of color, and I thought that I would reach out to them because we know that faith-based organizations already believe in serving and caring for the vulnerable children and their families, and many of the organizations make it their mission to do this work. So I wanted to identify the faith-based organizations within our region. I wanted faith-based organizations that resemble the children right now that are in care of the department, and my belief was that they would affirm and maintain ties cultural ties for the children, if they were placed with families that looked like them, that spoke the same language, etc. And I wanted to build and create partnerships with the faith-based organizations. So again, I thought that all the faith-based organizations were going to be crawling and wanted to create foster care initiatives and adoption initiatives within their faith-based organization. I definitely believe that they would have an increased knowledge of the needs of the children that were in care and are in care and that waiting for permanency. And I also expected that we would recruit more foster and adoptive homes for our children. And then that would eventually lead to the increased permanency for children of color. So the research that I did spoke about a lot of the collaboration efforts into specific states in Colorado and Arkansas. And what I read was that they were successful in sharing the needs of children in care and their need for permanency, as well as the need for more foster and adoptive parents. They also spoke about that they had a greater awareness of those needs because of the faith-based organization in that particular faith-based organization and project within their state. And they also helped with the recruitment of foster and adoptive families. And the examples that we're going to look at are Project 127 out of Colorado and the Call in Arkansas. The articles that I found, the only two evidence-based articles that I found were by the same author, and he, in both articles, he did surveys with both of the groups, and then did a second survey that compared the foster and adoptive parents within these organizations and compared that to a national sample that I think Wendy's Wonderful Kids did. So the faith-based initiatives called Project 127 in Colorado and the Call, they created more foster parent awareness and the knowledge of need and the intent. For instance, before individuals were exposed to the initiatives or the programs, they indicated that 59% were unaware or somewhat aware. And then when they were exposed to the programs, that 98% were aware of the need for families and the need that children have. So also what I thought was important here that with Project 127 is that 67% were not serious about foster care or becoming adoptive parents, and after they were exposed to the program and heard of the need, that 50% were seriously considering in becoming a foster or adoptive parent. And then with the Call, 66% were not serious, and after exposure to that particular program, that 64% were seriously considering in becoming a foster or adoptive parent. So in the second survey, which compared the satisfaction in comparison to the foster and adoptive families involved with these two initiatives compared to the national sample, almost all the families had a higher percentage rate of satisfaction in the 3 phases of retention, which are initial contact with the agency and licensure, time between licensure and placement, and the period after placement. All the families felt that they had a positive experience and that the agencies were much more attentive to their needs and aware of their needs. And the numbers that were provided was that 76% of the families involved with Project 127 and 50% of the families involved with the Call were satisfied with the response that they received compared to 24% of the national sample. I also found in my research that there are potential barriers that when we're working with faith-based organizations, for instance, incompatible beliefs, values, or methods, negative relationship history, and questions about cultural or faith competence. Sometimes, faith-based organizations could already have experienced the agency or the department in a negative way, and that might impact the work moving forward. Whatever the potential barriers are, these are just 3 that I named here. There are many more. That those barriers need to be addressed and talked and worked through before moving forward. I also found an article that spoke about the impact when faith-based organizations, those relationships that already existed in certain states, how it impacted the children of their state when the relationship had to end. In one state, there was a replacement of 2,000 to 3,000 children. In a second state, which was my state, in Massachusetts, there was a request and approval of 50% more overcapacity waivers when those children had to be replaced. And then in a third state, there was a replacement of about 700 children that they had to go into group home settings because of the relationship with the faith-based organizations had to end or ended. My research also, there were some gaps and limitations. What I found that there were only 2 evidence-based articles that I found in regards to the effectiveness of the relationship of faith-based organizations and agencies, and they were by the same author. And one of the surveys that he completed, which when Alfonso talked about this, about some of the gaps that a lot of the families were white, that's what I also found in the surveys, that there were demographic and socioeconomic differences. The families involved with the 2 faith-based initiatives, there was a higher number of white families, and they had higher incomes, they had more education. So it just made me think about other things, and how, more work or maybe another ARP another time or something. So we'll take a look at Massachusetts, where Massachusetts is or was in 2015. The first 2 columns that you see here talk about the census in regards to race and ethnicity and the percentage of the children. And the last few columns you will see in fiscal year 2015 in Massachusetts, the percentage of children that came to the attention of the department or child victims, the rate of disproportionality, the percentage of children that came into care at the end of that fiscal year, the rate of disproportionality, and then the percentage of adopted children in Massachusetts for that fiscal year. So I don't know if you're able to see, but I bolded the numbers where there was the rate of disproportionality, where either they were represented at a higher rate or overly, there was a disproportionate amount over the normal number of 1.0, or if it under 1.0 where they were underrepresented. The ones that stood out were the Black children and the Hispanic of any race. In Massachusetts, the Black children, they're 8.3%, but they come to the attention of the department at a higher rate, 12.6%, and which the rate of disproportionality is 1.5. They represent 14.5% of the children in care, and that rate of disproportionality is 1.7. And they are also, the percentage of the Black children adopted are 8.2, and then you see how the underrepresentation of for them being adopted at 0.7. There are some similarities for the Hispanic children. There is a higher percentage community of Hispanic children, but they also have similar numbers in regards to the percentage of child victims, those that come to the attention of the department, and their adoption rate. So. Here you will see foster children with the goal of adoption, and this is just specific for the regional office where I work in, so those 8 area offices. We have 530 children with the goal of adoption. This was as of March 2019. That's when I was collecting that specific information. 226 are white children, 5 children American Indian or Alaskan Native, and 28 black children, and then there were 181 children that were described as Hispanic of any race, and then 66 multiracial. I did omit, if you see there's not information covered here in regards to the Asian population, and as well I had a lot of information in regards to the numbers that were unable to determine. So I omitted that information and just concentrated on these 4 groups. So our finalized adoptions in this current fiscal year and as of March 2019 was 115. 61 of them were white children. 0 were American Indian or Alaskan Native. There were only 3 black children and 26 Hispanic children, and then 13 children that were multiracial. And this graph speaks to our resources that would like to adopt children, or pre-adoptive resources in our northern regional office. Right now we have 139 approved homes, 67 are white, 0 are American Indian, 2 black homes, and 8 Hispanic homes, and 0 multiracial homes. The light blue shaded area are unable to determine. That made me think of, I know this presents a large gap, and that just gave me other ideas of how can we better document that information so we can have a better picture of what we have, what our resources look like. So I'm working on that with our adoption supervisors. In this last slide, this is a comparison of the previous slides, so you can have a better picture of where the numbers are in regards to American Indian, the black, Hispanic children, multiracial, and white. And for the purposes of my ARP, I decided to concentrate on black and Hispanic communities or faith-based organizations of color, because that's where, predominantly where the numbers show that there was a greater need. So one of the strategies that I created with the help of my team was a 7-question survey, and the survey I send off electronically as well as snail mail, and so the 7 questions ask the faith-based organizations of color what their level of awareness needs of children of color in their particular community, the need of foster parents of color in their community, what the process were they aware of what the process looked like to become a resource in foster care or adoption, and if they were aware of any other faith-based organizations that were involved and worked with agencies. And also that they were, the last 2 questions asked them if they were interested in learning more of those processes and if they were interested in partnering. As they completed the surveys, and when I sent off the surveys, I started collecting the information that you saw in the previous slides, because I wanted to show them that information. And so I provide specific information of what our resources already look like and what the children in their communities look like. So with the help of Sharon Lynn, we had to identify a faith-based organization. She gave me a number to work with to try to work specifically or go out and meet 5 faith-based organizations. I also, the second strategy was to work with the recruiters that I supervise and the teams, the recruitment teams that already existed in the area offices to use their own connections to work with or to identify faith-based organizations that would become partners in creating resources and creating the awareness for the need. So I had a list to work from in regards to Black faith-based communities in the greater Boston area, and I used the internet to identify Hispanic faith-based organizations. I sent out a total of 48 electronically and also snail mail, and I had one online completed survey and 2 snail mail surveys that were returned, so not a good outcome of the survey. But in the action research project, I was able to have 3 partnership meetings with faith-based organizations where we met and presented and discussed with the leaders of the needs that the community had, and we presented on the material that we would be able to share, and we also included them, or they would let us know how they would like to move forward. And so from there, we started, we had 3 presentations or informational meetings, and in the first faith organization, the leader presented during the service that they were able to share that somebody from the agency was going to be present and be able to do a presentation and discuss the needs that were in the community and the need for foster and adoptive resources. So in the first faith-based organization, there were over 300 people. 2 informational meetings were completed after the services, and they included 90 people. From that, we received 6 inquiries, which people that expressed interest, and then that also moved forward in the application process. The second faith-based organization had 20 people during the informational session, and we received 4 inquiries and applications from that meeting. And then the third faith-based organization, the recruiters were able to set up after the services, and they shared information with 5 people that showed interest. So within these faith-based organizations, then we were able to create new established relationships, and we were able to move forward with the applicant and the inquiries, which I learned also that needed consistent follow-up because the leaders of the faith-based organizations were interested in knowing where those individuals were, and if meeting with the department and the recruiters provided was helpful. Sherilyn also suggested for me to go back to one of the faith-based organizations and ask them these questions. So what made them get involved? What can they share with other faith-based organizations about the experience? What else can the department do to help additional faith-based organizations get involved? And what initial things are the most important in order to be successful? And what the leader was able to share is that it made it easier for them to be involved because they already had 2 approved foster parents that attended that organization and that had active placements. So one in particular who works closely with one of the recruiters, she's very passionate about this as well. So she was the one that initiated those conversations with her leaders. And she shared her passion that she wanted to spread the word with her organization. And the leader was very open, met with us, wanted to know what information we were going to share, and then presented to the organization itself, and we were able to meet with them. She did find that very helpful. She also found helpful that the particular information, the numbers of the resources and the children in care, that was very significant to her, and she said that that would help moving forward. So what I learned in the process is that it reinforced what I learned in the research that I completed. They talked about gatekeepers, and what I noticed is where we were able to go into faith-based organizations and meet with the organizations is when there were gatekeepers already existent. So they was a foster parent. The other organizations were it was a social worker already that worked in one of the area offices that she was able to help and be a bridge for us. And I learned that there are different approaches to obtain data. Sometimes we started with a specific focus, and I was working on the survey and sweating about the survey, and every month Sherilyn's like, oh no, only one still. But in the meantime, all this other work was happening. And so I'm like, wait, it's happening already, it's just happening in a different way. So I'm not sure if the survey was the best approach for starting to initiate relationships with faith-based organizations that are unknown. And I did put cultural barriers here, but I think after rereading the research, I could have described it better, maybe cultural differences or different cultures, where, for instance, in the Hispanic community, faith-based organization, we're people person, so we like to interact face to face. Maybe I could have approached them in a different way. So this is my PICO, if faith-based organizations and communities of color in the Northeast region of Massachusetts participate in activities designed to increase engagement, communication, and intentional partnerships for the purposes of recruitment of foster and adoptive homes, will it result in increased knowledge and recruitment efforts with the goal of increasing permanency for children of color currently experiencing the foster care system? This is a long one. And I'm probably in the middle right now. When I looked at the results of the survey and then the results of what happened naturally and organically through already existing relationships, and you can say both things. No, it didn't work maybe in the survey, but it is working with already those pre-existing relationships through those gatekeepers and those bridges already. And it's something that I will continue working on. I'm very passionate about this. And now we're also hiring additional recruiters, and I've made it a point to hire folks that also represent the children that would probably have maybe, I don't want to say easier access, but if they look like the faith-based organization, that the faith-based organizations will be more willing and open their doors more willingly. So again, the different approaches that I think would have helped, and I could have added here, is used our family resource liaisons or ambassadors. They are hired by the department. They're active foster and adoptive parents that are provide support to already licensed resources, and our ambassadors help with the recruitment of new families and individuals. And Sharon Lynn wanted me to go to 48 faith-based organizations of color to all the services and knock on their door. I was like, I don't know if I can do that. But yes, I could have done it maybe for some, and maybe it would have produced other outcomes. So also I learned that when we create those new relationships, it's important to have regular contact with them. I found that in the families that move forward with the increase in applications, that I ended up calling about every 2 weeks just to make sure where they were at, if they had any questions, if they need help completing the application, and so on. So, and again, I added the cultural factor, but again, the cultural differences that I mentioned in the previous slide about knowing that faith-based organization, knowing what their values and their vision and their mission, and also identifying ways to better to get in the door, get in the door to the faith-based organization. What did work was the bridges, the gatekeepers, the folks the foster parents, our social workers. Do I have time? Just checking. So that's what worked for us. The project itself provided an opportunity for me to grow as a leader, to really share what I've learned in the project itself with the recruiters that I supervise. It provided an opportunity to also replicate some of that work with faith-based organizations of color, and to go into different diverse communities. And it also to be intentional about the recruitment of diverse families for our kids. The whole experience, looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I worked for 21 years. Not like being intentional and knowing all this information. So it's really inspired me, and it's instilling new skills, especially with the transformational leadership. Being part of the calls and the webinars and the coaches specifically about transformational leadership, it confirmed for me work that I was already doing, but also I was able to learn more and put those into action with my team. I've also shared with all the supervisors in my office, and we have group supervision, and I was able to share a lot of the great articles in regards to transformational leadership, and that's been very helpful. This experience has provided for me a broader perspective and the importance of working to improve the outcomes for our kids. And it created a new team or a network within you guys. I've learned a lot. I've learned from not only what we read, but also in the calls that we had monthly. I've picked up on certain things that already exist in your states that I would like to share with our leadership team, and hopefully I can see things change in different ways too, and not just with my project. I want to end with this African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. One of the articles said that agencies and they can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. That we need other agencies to help out. Our kids come from all different communities, so we should be able to go into the different communities and recruit